The first perspective is accounts receivable at the point of sale, meaning as we're working through a transaction, how do we charge something to AR? How do we look up and or assign an account to a customer? What options exist from that perspective at the front counter? And the second piece will actually be looking at the accounts receivable module itself. So we're going to start out here just in the main Hour Writer program, and I've got my customer, Pat Clark. That's down here in my work in progress. Pat came in because she was looking to get some AC work done on her 2002 Ford Mustang. Ready to send Pat on her way, so in the upper right-hand corner, we're going to go ahead and click on Finalize. And when I click on Finalize, after I validate my mileage, it will take me to my payment window. On the right-hand side, my tender types available to me are cash, checks, credit cards, and then I have two buttons here that says Charge to a Third Party and or Allow a One-Time Charge. So as we're starting out the conversation with accounts receivable, this is not a customer that has an open account with me. However, if we wanted to charge this to accounts receivable, my two options would be to either charge to a third party. So this is Pat Clark, who doesn't have an account with me. However, her husband does. So if I wanted to charge this transaction to a third-party account, if I click on that third-party account, the first piece is I can password protect the ability to use that function. I'll put in my password, and then now it wants me to search. And I want to find, well, whose account am I going to charge this to? So as I go to do my search, I searched by Clark, and the only result it returned to me are customers that have an open account. Notice I've got Doug Clark, and there are two asterisks in front of his name, which if you look down into the left, tells me that two asterisks delineate that there is an open account for that customer. When I search through this third-party window, it gets filtered down, and it will only allow me to find customers that already have an open account. We'll talk more about what that means here in just a moment. So if I was to select that third-party account, I'll click on OK. It'll want to know how frequently we're going to send a statement for this particular transaction, monthly, semi-monthly, or weekly. And once I've assigned that as well, it's telling me that this is going to be paid for with a third-party charge, and the details are we're going to charge that to Doug Clark's account. I'm going to go ahead and click on Cancel. I don't want to actually charge that to a third-party account. But when we cancel, we get back out of our payment window, and when I click on Finalize again, it takes me back in, and now we can start the whole process all over again. Now we've got our third-party charge, which says I've got somebody else that has an open account where I'm going to assign this AR balance. We can also do what's called a one-time charge. So if I said I'm going to allow Pat Clark to have an outstanding AR balance with me, and expect her to come in to make payments against it, but not allow her to charge things as we move forward, then I could do a one-time charge. Again, if we do a one-time charge, it'll want me to assign and or enter in a specific password level, also define how frequently we will be sending a statement, and then click on OK. And then now, again, we've got our one-time charge flagged in there for monthly billing. So from this window here, having done nothing else with Pat Clark's transactions, my two options to close this transaction to AR would be either to charge to a third-party account and or to allow a one-time charge. I'm going to click on Cancel one more time, because we're going to get out of there, and we're going to change one of those options, meaning third-party charge and one-time charge were my two options. If I go into my Edit Customer window, so up here towards the upper left-hand corner, I'll click on Edit Customer. When that shows up, in the center towards the bottom, there's an extra tab that says Other Info. I'll click on the Other Info tab, and specifically in here, the reason that we're going to talk about this window here is in the lower right-hand corner, where it says Charge Account. Right now, the credit limit is 0, which indicates that there is no credit limit. However, the checkbox that says Open Account is not set. So if I clicked on Open Account, now I've got Pat Clark designated to have an open account. We are going to charge finance charges, and we'll send her statements on a monthly basis. So we define those different parameters. Click on OK, and then now if you notice, there's a little button up here in our Edit Customer window that says that she has an AR account. If I was to click on that button, it tells me that she has a 0 balance in accounts receivable, no credit limit, no balance, unlimited available, and no date of an oldest charge. But now if I was to go back and hit Finalize again, when I click on OK, as I come into my payments window, I now have charge to AR account as opposed to allow a one-time charge. This customer has an open account, so therefore there isn't an opportunity to allow that one-time charge. So all I'll do is I'll click on Charge to AR account and then click on Finalize in the lower right-hand corner. It will allow me to print a final repair order. If we'd like, we can print that and print that to the screen in my case. So we'll go ahead and we'll print that final repair order, and then I also have the prompt turned on to schedule an appointment for this customer and vehicle. We won't do that for Pat Clark, although maybe schedule an appointment for every Friday to make sure she's coming in and paying against the outstanding accounts receivable balance. As we look at our transaction, the one nuance that we see is down here where it says payments. It shows that the payment was on an account. This amount in the lower right-hand corner, the total invoice was $1032.64, 0 paid, and then $1032.64 in outstanding balance due. So we go ahead and we close out of there. So as far as accounts receivable at the point of sale is concerned, one-time charge, third-party charge, or with an open account, then we have the ability to go ahead and assign it to that open account. Now, a couple of nuances or configuration settings that we saw as we went along, or at least will impact the behavior as we go through. I'm going to go over to the configuration module. When I open up the configuration module, underneath the configuration header, I'm going to go down to Repair Order and then RO Options. First place we'll stop is in this RO Options window, and there will be a couple of different settings in here that are relevant as far as AR is concerned. Starting with where it says, when closing RO, your options are to allow a one-time charge and or allow a third-party charge. Essentially what it's asking is, should those buttons even appear in the payments window? So I've got cash, check, and credit cards, which will appear by default. No way to turn those on and or off. However, if I was to uncheck these boxes, then those options to allow a one-time charge and allow a third-party charge won't appear in my finalized window. Now, if I take those off, I have to close our writer and open it back up again to have it recognize that change. But again, those options there under when closing RO will define whether or not they even appear. In my case, I had them showing up in my payments window, but I had them password protected. So I could go ahead and I could tell the system what security level would be required in order to go ahead and use each and or either of those functions. One last piece about AR before we leave this window here. If you notice, there's an option there that says Display AR Warning. I've got that checked. What that does is, if we were to come back in here and start another new transaction, so I'm going to go ahead and find my friend Miss Pat Clark again. So there's Pat. Down there, she's got an open account now. If I was to go ahead and hit the Enter key on the keyboard, select her vehicle, and then I'll leave the mileage where it is, now it gives me an AR warning. So as the customer comes back in for additional services, it says, this customer has an unpaid balance in accounts receivable. The credit limit is none. The open balance is $1032.64. Available credit, unlimited. That kind of scares me a bit. And then the oldest charge is just within that 0 to 30-day range because we did just finalize that transaction today. I'll click on OK, and as it comes up, we're not going to follow up on any of our services, at least at the present moment. But now back over to our Parts and Labor tab, where maybe I'll come in here and I'll tell the system that her limit should be $1,500. And if I then clicked on OK and looked at my warning message again, now it tells me that there's the credit limit of $1,500. So in theory, $467.36 is what she has available as far as open credit is concerned. So again, we can have the system prompt us with that AR warning, and again, that's driven by in the Repair Order Options window towards the upper left-hand corner where it says Display AR Warning. So 3 options in this window here that impact the behavior of accounts receivable. Before we leave our configuration module, one other place I want to stop is underneath the security settings. So there are a couple of security settings that are a little bit, I guess, not as apparent or obvious as some others. Under configuration, down to security, and then over to security levels. In this window here, if we were to go ahead and bring up, let's say, underneath our repair orders and estimates, and if we scroll down a little bit, you notice Edit Customer Other Info Open Account. So this setting right here, if we looked in the Edit Customer window, and let me pull this back up, in this Edit Customer window, here's the Other Info tab. If I go back down to Security, Notice how it says edit customer other info. So let's start out with just those two. If I have a security setting on edit customer, then just by hitting that icon, I'll have to put in the password. If I have a security setting on edit customer other info, then by going in and clicking that other info tab, I'll have to enter in a password. As I continue down through the list, edit customer other info tax exempt or edit customer other info open account. Two other options in here. Essentially what it's saying is if I came in here and if I wanted to modify this center section where it says it's tax exempt, then I would have to put in a password. Or if I wanted to change something about this lower right-hand section, I would have to put in a password. So again, if I'm back in this window here, you notice, let's make it a level 8 password to edit my customer info about my other account. I'll click on. As I come on down towards the bottom, if you'll notice there's an option in here where it says one-time charge, charge to AR account, and then charge to a third party. In my case, both of those ask me for a level 5 password. I don't have a password currently configured for just charging to an AR account. So again, not only are all options, but also as far as AR is concerned, some security settings that come into play as well. And again, the ones that define and or deal with this other info tab are the ones that are not necessarily as apparently obvious as to not only where they are, but what they do. Anytime I make a change to a security setting, in order to see it take effect, I've got to close the RO Writer window and then open it back up. So give me just a moment as we go ahead and we launch RO Writer again. I was to come back in here for one of my other customers. We'll pick on John Smith. Once we pull up John Smith into my Edit Customer window, and I can still get to the Other Information tab, but I'd like to open an account for John Smith. Click on OK, and now it says, well, you can only do that if you have a certain security level. So while I can see the window, and it's not inherently obvious that it is password protected, in order for me to go ahead and assign an open account to a customer, I've got to have that level 8 password in this case. So again, you can kind of keep somebody from being able to charge something to AR, be it from the one-time charge, the third-party charge, the just AR account charging, and or you have the ability to keep somebody from modifying which customers in your system have an open account, both configurable security settings back on the configuration side. Now leaving configuration for the time being, on the left-hand side underneath my quick launch section, I've got an icon there that says Accounts Receivable. So we're going to bring up our Accounts Receivable window. And when I do, a handful of icons up here in the upper left-hand corner, as I look at these icons here, we're going to just talk about the different ones that are available: edit accounts, post-payment, statements, reports, and then last but not least, setup. We're going to look at setup first and then come back to the beginning and look at both edit accounts and post-payment. We're going to setup. There's actually not that much as far as the setup of accounts receivable is concerned in the AR module. A couple of different things that we can do is we can have the system charge finance charges. If you remember when we were looking back at open accounts for our customers, inside of the Edit Customer window, we can define whether or not an account would be applicable for finance charges. I'm going to give a consumer like Pat Clark I'm going to extend credit. I may charge Pat finance charges. If I'm doing work for a national fleet, say an ARI or a Donlin, I'm probably not going to have them charge finance charges simply because they're not going to remit not only finance charges on top of the balance that we've charged through the accounts receivable module. So we can do finance charges. The other piece is billing monthly, weekly, and or semi-monthly. We'll talk about that a little more as we get into statements, but back down to here. So if we're going to charge finance charges, what percentage? You'll notice in my case, 1.5%. I am relatively cheap as far as finance charges are concerned, but you can set that to whatever you'd like it to be for charging finance charges. And it says for every 30 days a charge is not paid, begin at finance charges when the charge is greater than this many days old. So I give you 45 days to pay it, and it's aged based upon the date of the charge. So if you think about it, I'm going to run the statements on the first calendar day of each month, meaning the first business day of each month. If you finalize the transaction on the 1st of September, and I'm going to send you the statement for that on the 1st of October, it wouldn't start charging you finance charges until after the middle of October, say October 15th, based on that 45-day delta. Now you have the ability to age charges based on either the day of the charge and or the date of the first statement. So if I said, well, we're going to do it based upon the date of the first statement, and I said we're going to make it every 30 days, now that transaction, it doesn't matter whether it was finalized on September 1st or September 30th, it was in that billing cycle, that statement that got sent on October 1st. Pardon me. Therefore, we're going to age it based upon that October 1st send, and we get to October 31st. That would be the first day we would potentially assess finance charges. Beneath this, as we're putting messages on statements, I just have the option to send different messages based upon the age of the charge. So if it was, again, 0 to 30 days, it'll just be thanks for your business. Once the charge gets over 30 days, it's a little bit, it's still fairly nice, but we're just asking them to reach out to us. And then again, as we get past 60 and 90, we're not quite so pleasant anymore. But again, as we print a statement based upon the date of the oldest charge in their accounts receivable account, it will use any one of the 4 different messages that we have configured. So really it's finance charges, statement messages are the 2 configurable options as we get into setup over in the accounts receivable module. I'm going to click on cancel and or OK to get back out of here. If we click on OK, now it's going to remember the configuration changes that we made to both the aging and the dates of aging. In this window here, we've got our edit accounts, and then we also have post payments. So when a customer comes back in, so Pat Clark, we just closed a transaction for just over $1,000. We opened an account for Pat Clark, and she's come back in to make a payment against her account. So we're going to click on post payment, and if I was to go in and look, we're going to go ahead and we're going to search for the customer by last name. And there's my friend Pat again, the 2 asterisks in front of her name, indicative of the fact that she does have an open account. We select Pat Clark. She has just the 1 transaction outstanding. So listed down here would be all of the different transactions that she had available. The date that we're going to post the payment is going to be today. She came in and she wrote us a check for $200. So we'll go ahead and we'll select $200 as our payment amount. Now it shows that the amount of the payment was $200. The allocated payments are 0, and the payment balance is going to be $200. This will make a little bit more sense in terms of allocated balance or allocated payments when we get to a customer that has more than 1 transaction. But essentially it wants to know you're going to pay $200 against which AR balance should that payment be made. If I just leave it unallocated and post it, what it will essentially do is it will post a credit memo. I have 2 line items that said 1032 and 200. In theory, eventually they would offset and come back to 0, but it won't adjust the outstanding balance on that from $1,000 down to $800. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to either double-click on the transaction, and when I do, I'll tell it that we want to assign $200 as the payment, or if I was to hit clear payments, easier than that, I can just tell the system to auto-apply. When I click on auto-apply, it says, well, I'm going to look for the oldest charge based upon the sequence numbers here over in the reference number column, and I'm going to assign the amount to that charge. If I have more monies available than what that charge is in total, I'll assign that one to be paid in full, and then I'll move on to the next one, and so on and so forth. So auto-apply basically says look for the oldest charge. Now it's not based on the date, it's based upon the sequence of the reference number, and apply the payment accordingly. We'll assign the payment. I'm going to hit post payment once we're ready to go ahead and finalize, or to go ahead and post this $200 payment against this AR balance. Now you have post payment, you have post and continue. The difference between post payment and post and continue is when I click on post payment, it'll give me the option to define the tender type and then go ahead and exit out of my window for my friend Pat Clark. If I hit post and continue, it would allow me to define that payment and then return directly back to this window here. So again, if I had a customer that had 20 outstanding AR transactions and they sent me 20 different checks and I wanted to post them all individually, I would use Post and Continue to stay within that customer's account and continue posting those transactions. So I'll hit Post Payment in this case. Then she gave us a check, my check number, and then also my reference number that I have, my authorization. We'll click on OK, and then in the lower right-hand corner, my option is Save Payment. So I click on Save Payment. It asks if I'd like to print a receipt for this payment. Well, if I wanted to give Pat Clark something that she could walk out the door with that shows that we took a $200 payment from her, we can go ahead and we can print that receipt. There's customer's name, there's the invoice, there's the total amount that was paid. I'll exit out of my AR payment receipt here. And then now if we were to go back in and look at our post payment and find our friend Pat Clark, then we could go ahead and we could see that previous balance was $1032.64. $832.64 is the current outstanding AR. One other piece as far as that's concerned, I'm going to jump back over into our writer here for just a second. I'm going to get back into Pat Clark and or at least go into history. And when we find our friend Pat and her 2002 Ford Mustang, you'll notice has an AR account, and there's that same window and or that same AR information that we saw before. There's our transaction. If I actually went in to look at the transaction itself, on our calculations tab, we can see what AR payments have been made against that transaction. So again, if I ever wanted to back into and see, well, right now it says the current invoice balance is $832.64. Let's see how recently she's made a payment. I can click on AR payments for this invoice to see exactly, again, what has been paid against this particular transaction. Close back out of here and get back into my accounts receivable module, because we're going to go back through and we're going to post another payment. Again, in this case, we're going to look up our friends at ARI. So I do work not necessarily every day, but fairly frequently for a client fleet that is managed by ARI, and I've got a customer in the system just called ARI. So we've got 4 different balances or 4 different outstanding transactions. Now, a couple of different ways that we could go through this. Again, if I was to say, well, they just sent me a check for $500, and I'm going to apply that against their payment. Now, ARI wouldn't do that. They wouldn't just send you an amount, say like a consumer might to a credit card. But if I put in an amount and I hit auto apply, what you'll notice is it says based upon the reference number, I'm going to pay this one first, this one second, and I've got a little bit of money left over. I'm not going to fully pay that one there because I'm still just $5 and change short of paying off the entire balance. But if they had sent me 3 different checks, so I could say, well, let's see, they sent me a check for $133.76 for this transaction here. So what I'll do is I will allocate it to that one there and then hit post and continue. They sent me a check, and then now I'm going to save the payment. We won't print a receipt, but now I'm going to come right back here and I'm going to say, well, $342.90 was the second one. And the same process. We'll hit post and continue. So what post and continue allows you to do is when you get that particular customer that sends you multiple checks, it's very easy to go through and say, okay, these are all of the transactions that we've paid for with the different checks that were sent for this particular customer. So again, the difference between post and continue is that allows me to stay in the same customer and go ahead and continue to make my accounts receivable payments. Back into this window here, we've got the Edit Accounts icon in the upper left-hand corner. So if we came in here and we looked at, well, there's our friend Pat Clark. We'll keep picking on Pat. And when Pat comes in, now we can not only edit our customer information, so if I wanted to go ahead and assign that balance, I could do that, or assign that credit limit. We could do that from here. We could also add a charge and or roll back a payment. So she came in and she wrote us a check. Now, we haven't yet taken that check to the bank, but let's say we find out that, you know what, we took the check to the bank and it came back NSF. So the check bounced. We no longer have that $200 from our friend Pat Clark. So I'd like to roll back the payment that she made. I'm looking for the date the payment was made. It was 9/22 of 2015. I'll click on OK, and what you'll notice is it now says, all right, the previous balance was $1032.64. The amount currently outstanding was $832.64. $64. However, we've rolled back a payment that was made on 9/22 for $200. So therefore, the outstanding balance back to that $1032.64. Now maybe we have a $25 NSF fee that we're going to charge our friend Pat. I clicked on Add Charge. We'd like to go ahead, we'd like to add that in. So in this case, my reference number, well, we'll make it the same as the reference number that was on the original transaction that was paid. And in this case, it's going to be a non-sufficient funds fee, so we'll add that in there. We're going to flag it for today. The statement that has been sent will, whenever we next send the statement, it will show up there. And again, the last statement sent, not yet sent, so therefore it just defaults to today's date. No purchase order number, but the amount's going to be $25. That's what we're going to charge her, and then now I click on OK. So now we have that NSF fee included in their account as well. So again, we can come in here, we can edit the information about the existing charges, we can add a charge through the edit accounts function, and or again, if I'd like, I can just edit my customer information as well. I hit the X in the upper left-hand corner. So we've edited accounts, we have post-payment, and then time comes for us to go ahead and run a statement. So in here we've got statements, and when I go ahead and bring up the statements window, if you notice the type of statement that I'm going to print, I can print monthly, semi-monthly, weekly, and or statements for a single customer. Just because somebody's flagged as monthly doesn't mean I can only run a statement once a month. Or just because they're flagged as weekly doesn't mean I have to run it every week. Essentially, all this is saying is we've got 3 different customer types. Were I to look at a customer inside of our Other Info tab, I have 3 different billing cycles that I can assign to you, monthly, weekly, or semi-monthly. If I say I'm going to run my monthly statements, it says look for everybody that has open charges that are flagged as monthly. If I'm going to run semi-monthly, then again, it just looks for anybody whose account is flagged as semi-monthly, and so on as far as weekly is concerned. So when we're in AR and we're running statements, that's all it's doing is it's saying, well, what type of statements would we like to run? Or I could also just run it for a single customer. But in our case, we're going to run monthly statements, pardon me, at the right-hand side, print charge and payment details for the period from A to B. We're going to go back a month because much like when I get my credit card bill, it shows me here are all of the transactions that have posted in the last billing cycle. So since the last time I sent the AR statements, here are all the transactions that have been posted, and I'll go ahead and click on Print, and it tells me that these are the customers that we're going to print statements for. Now, I'm not sending a statement to ARI. They're remitting me checks based upon invoices that I've submitted for payment, but I will send Pat, Dynalectric's a local fleet, and Ernest Williams, also a customer that has an open balance. So we'll go ahead and we will print those. I'm going to print them to the screen. It'll take just a moment, and then eventually it'll come back up and it'll print some statements for me. So there's our friend Pat. No payments because we rolled back the one payment that she made. There is that NSF fee, the repair order, and then the previous balance on that same repair order that are outstanding on her statement of account. So here is our account. Again, all of her balance is current, so therefore we just tell Pat, thank you for your business. Would have printed not just Pat, but also a couple of other statements, both Dynalectric and Ernest Williams, down there in the lower right-hand corner as well. Again, going back to statements for just a moment, if I was to print for a single customer, so I'll go ahead and I'll hit print, and I'm going to bring up my friend Mr. Williams. And there's our friend Ernest, and in this case, we'll print him to the screen. Now, I didn't have it print the detail of any transactions. However, it will actually show me the balance open prior to today's date as far as that's concerned. One other piece as far as statements are concerned, and this is important to note. When you run a statement, that is when it assesses the finance charge. Meaning, as we looked at the setup window, my options were to age the charges based upon the date of the first statement or the date of the charge, and then to add the finance charge for every 30 days after a charge has not been paid. So when we run that first statement, if we're aging based upon the date of the statement, that's when it says, okay, from here forward, now we're going to start counting. When you run the statement, that's when it says, well, now I'm going to assign a finance charge. you potentially could be assigning finance charges for multiple different months. I didn't run AR statements for more than 60 days. And so when I went ahead and I ran that statement, it said, well, you need finance charges for this 30-day time frame and this 30-day time frame because we've skipped over both of those windows. So again, when you physically run the statement, that is what will apply the finance charge. It won't do it through edit accounts or post-payment. It is only through the process of generating the statement that the finance charges get applied. One last place we want to stop before we're done with this morning's conversation. That's over in the reports menu. That's 7 or 8 reports that are available in the accounts receivable module. The first thing I'll point out is if you notice, some of them have asterisks, some of them do not. The ones that have asterisks will pay attention to the date range. The two that don't, the accounts aging report and the open charges report, are just going to tell us everything about that particular report, regardless of when a charge occurred. So if I was to run the accounts aging report, for example, it's going to tell me that based upon the individual customers that I've got, here's what they have in the different buckets, 30, 60, 90, and here's what I've charged them in finance charges over the course of time. So those are the different icons or options that we have. Again, if I was to look at the open charges report, the only difference there is a little bit more detail in terms of not just when it was charged, but also here are the different balances that are making up those outstanding account balances that we saw on our window just a moment ago. So the open charges and the accounts aging report just look at all the relevant data. It's not looking at the date range here on the right-hand side. If we wanted to look at an AR transactions report, or maybe specifically a customer AR transactions report, then that will pay attention to our date range. Show me all of the AR transactions that happened between the 1st of September and then down month to date. When I click on prints, again, that's going to look just at the date range we've selected to tell me here is every accounts receivable transaction that has transpired since the 1st of September. Or maybe I'd like to look at the customer's AR transactions report. The only difference here is it's going to ask me which customer. Same exact report, except now filtered down by just a customer that we've searched for through our accounts receivable piece. Who do we charge finance charges to and when? What AR payments have been made and when? What payments have been made by a specific customer? So a customer calls up and says, show me all the payments that I've sent you in the last year. Well, we can run that customer payments report. And last but not least, we've got our deleted charge report. So if I hit the X in the upper right-hand corner, and if I went into edit accounts and pulled up my friend Pat Clark one last time, and then as we pull up Pat Clark, there's our NSF fee. If I was to go in and delete that, makes that go away, and onto my reports, I can still see that through our deleted charge report. So just because it's no longer in my window for my friend Pat Clark doesn't mean that it's no longer available and or that I've lost tracking on it through the course of time.